when I'm at restaurants, I am a big tipper. You know, I like to show people my appreciation. So when they come up to the table, I say, the quicker I get my order, the bigger your tip will be, right? And then the food will come fast. And then when we get ready to leave, I'll ask them, how much you want?
You'll ask the waiter how much you want?
How much you want? And the most someone said was $4,000. And I said, okay, no problem.
You gave him $4,000?
Yeah.
You should have punched him in the head is what you should have.
Hi guys and welcome back. In this section we're going to be looking at interacting with APIs. APIs are a really simple thing. They're basically a program that receives data from you and gives you data back. Be that what it may. So in this section we're going to be using this API called OpenExchangeRates. This receives some data from you, which is what you want from it, and it sends you some data back. For example, the latest currency exchange rates. So let's have a look at OpenExchangeRates. The first thing to do is, of course, to sign up. And they've got some paid plans, but they've also got a free plan. The free plan is a bit limited, but it's okay for what we want to do and to learn about APIs. So sign up to the free plan, and then let's go over to our dashboard. When you're in your dashboard, you'll see something like this. I've got already some API requests that I've made. I've interacted with the API already. So here it shows me what I have interacted with and when. But since we're only just getting started, do go to your App IDs section of the page and then create a new App ID. The API needs this App ID whenever you ask it something, so it knows it's you and that you have an account. So by sending them this string here, the App ID, then they'll know that you are a valid user. Just copy that and let's go over to our program where we're going to start working on interacting with this API. So once you've got this, that's everything you need. I'll see you in the next video.
The dangerous man is never the loudest man. I'm saying that you need to be careful about who you follow. In my experience, I don't care how big a fella is. I don't care how much he works out. I don't care how much he walks around without a shirt on. I don't care how big his tattoos are. The louder he is, the more insecure he is inside. A tough man is not going to always tell you how tough he is. He's not going to get online and keep showing you clip after clip after clip of him hitting a punching bag, of him winning in fights and knocking people down. The secure man don't have to put all fights.
In this video, we're going to be creating our first program that interacts with an API. We're going to need to install the requests package. So go over to your project interpreter and press the plus icon and install the requests package. If you've got it installed already because we used it in the past, then that's fine. You can just keep that one. But I have created a new project, so I have to install it again. Once that's installed, just close that and press OK. And that's everything we'll need for this section. So let's go over and create our new file, which is going to be called app.py as usual. Now we're going to need to import requests and we will need to get our app ID in here. So just copy what you had in your dashboard in OpenExchangeRates. Next up, we need to go and look at the OpenExchangeRates documentation to see what they can give us. So if you go over to openexchangerate.org and click on the documentation, you will see the different parts of the API that you can access. You can read through this and it's actually quite good documentation, but normally what you'll see is a section called API endpoints. So these are the different things that you can access in this API. Essentially, this is the data that the API needs from you in order to know what to give you back. If we make a request to this address here, then the API will know that what we want is the latest exchange rates available from the API. So it will return you those latest exchange rates. This is what an API is. It has a definition of what it accepts, in this case, a request on this endpoint, and a definition on what it responds with. And that is really what an API is. So if you make a request like this to /API/latest.json, then it will give you a few different fields and all the rates that it currently has. The base rate is always United States dollars, at least in the free plan, so you'll get all the rates parting from USD. This question mark app ID equal your app ID is called a query string parameter. This is how we send extra information to APIs and to websites over the internet. Just put a question mark and then the key, which is app_ID, equal, and then the value, which is the value of your app ID. So knowing this, let's copy all of that here and go back to PyCharm. And we're going to say that the endpoint is this one there. Now we're going to make a request. So we'll say response equals requests.get, and we will go for the endpoint, question mark app_ID equal app ID. And this builds out the address like we had on the documentation. And then the exchange rates will be the response.json, and we will access the rates value inside this dictionary. Response.json gives us a Python dictionary containing the response, and as you can see from here, this dictionary has a key called rates. So we're accessing the rates key inside that response. Next, let's try to convert $1,000 into pounds. So we will say the USD amount multiplied by the exchange rates GBP. Remember that the base rate of this response is United States dollars, and that means that the GBP rate inside this response is the equivalent of $1. So by multiplying $1,000 by the rate, you will get something like 800 something pounds. And then we can print that USD amount is GBP amount. Let's right click that and run it. And you see down here that you get USD 1000 is GBP 791.2. Sometimes this number can get really long depending on the division and how Python does it. Don't worry too much about it. We will learn how to format this to a certain number of decimal places in a later video. So this is how you interact with an API. Usually the API requires some form of authentication or authorization. In this case, the app ID is our form of authorization. It's just a string that we include and that tells the API that we are a valid user when they receive it. Then it also has a set of data that it requires. In this case, all the data it requires is the endpoints that we want to access and the app ID. And then it gives us back some data that is already predetermined and is always in the documentation, or should be in the documentation, and that is the rates. So once you have the rates, you can multiply the USD amount by that and get a pound amount, or indeed any other currency. Thanks for joining me in this video. I'll see you in the next one.
What's the thought that runs an addiction? It's always the same. I'm not enough. I'm not enough is going to be behind every addiction thing. Because if you're not enough, guess what you need? More. I need more food, more alcohol, more drugs, more sex, more shopping, more Netflix. And many addicts try to change the behavior.
Hi guys, and welcome back. In this video, we're going to be simplifying our code a bit and making it a bit more reusable by creating a client for our API. Creating API clients is a very common thing to do. Right now, our application has a lot of knowledge of how the API works. For example, it knows that it has to make a request to this particular endpoint, it knows that it needs this particular app ID, it knows that it has to access the rates key in the response, and so on. Now, this is all well and good, and it has to be somewhere in our application in order for it to work, but maybe it doesn't belong in our main application. We can encapsulate it in another file so that it's easier to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new file that will be a client to this API. And what that means is it's going to contain a set of functions that allows us to very easily interact with this API without having to know exactly what endpoint we want to use and so on. So what we'll do is we are going to essentially delete this stuff here, and we will say that the client is an OpenExchange client, and we'll pass in the app ID. Then the GBP amount will no longer be the USD amount multiplied by the exchange rate, so we no longer have those. We will say client.convert USD amount from USD to, let's stick to double quotation marks to GBP. So what this will do is we will create this object of this class OpenExchange client, and then it will have a method called convert, and this method will take in a number, a currency that it should start from, and a currency that it should convert to. Let's go and create a new Python package that I'm going to call libs, because this client is a library, and I'm going to call this OpenExchange. The reason why I'm calling this package libs, by the way, is because the files inside this package are files for interacting with other things that are not part of our application. And whenever you're interacting with other things that are not part of your application, that's usually called a library for something else. So here we're defining a library for the OpenExchangeRates API. So we're going to say import requests, and we will define our OpenExchange client. The base URL that we're going to define here is https openexchangerates.org/API. Then we will define an init method that takes in an app ID, and we'll say self app ID is app ID. And then we will say that the latest exchange rates are the ones that we already requested earlier. So return requests.get self.base URL /latest.json app ID equal self.appid.json. So we'll define the latest as being the result of getting the latest.json again, passing in the app ID, and we'll only get the JSON back. So we no longer need the response for anything. So we're just going to extract the JSON from that and return it. Then we'll define our convert method that takes in a from amount, a from currency, and a to currency. What this says is that the rates are self.latest rates, like that, and the to rate, so the rate that we're interested in is the rates of to currency. Then we'll say if the from currency is USD, which is almost always going to be. The reason we're extracting this into a separate if statement is because the base rate of the latest is always USD. So we'll just say return from amount times to rate. We'll leave it as this just for a moment while we continue with our app. And here we're going to make this a property. The reason for it is because this doesn't take any arguments, and it just makes a return. It doesn't actually modify the object at all. So by making it a property, it's a little bit easier to access and to reason about, knowing that when you use it that you cannot pass in any arguments or do anything with it. So just by doing self.latest and getting the rates of that, it almost looks like this is a value stored within the class, but it is a dynamic value. Okay, so now that we have this, as long as we are converting from USD to GBP, this is going to work. So all we have to do is import. So from libs OpenExchange, import OpenExchange client. Let's run our app. And you'll see that the value is the same, which is good. That is exactly what we wanted. Now, if the input currency is not USD, we need to convert it into USD first before converting it into the final currency. So we'll say from in USD is from amount, but divided by the rate in from currency. Normally, when we are performing a currency exchange, we multiply by the rate in order to give us the base in the new currency. But if we want to go the other way around, where we want to turn a currency into the base, we have to divide. And then we'll say return from in USD multiplied by rate, just as above. Alright, so now we can convert from any currency into any other currency using this method, which is much simpler because now that we've got that, you could potentially write unit tests for it. You could, of course, use it in multiple places in your application. You can write documentation for it, so it's a little bit clearer what it does. And you don't have to have all that code in just one place in your application. So if you wanted to convert 1,000 euros to GBP, do make sure to rename this variable. If you do that, then you'll see that 1,000 euros is GBP 885, basically 886. And this is here where we encounter the long numbers. If you want to format a number as 2 decimal places, you just gotta add after the variable name, but within the curly braces, :.2f. And that is gonna limit this to 2 decimal places. And you can see that it rounds appropriately, and then you get 886.00. But we're going to go back into USD just so it's a bit clearer, and also all our strings are using USD. That's it for this video. We have created a simple client that gets the data from the API and then uses it all within one class so that it's much easier to think about, easier to reuse, and easier to test later on as well. Thanks for joining me in this video. I'll see you in the next one.
Do not be discouraged by the opinions of others. Don't be discouraged if someone tells you you don't have the right look or the right sound or the right voice, or this isn't the right fit for you. Then fine, and you go somewhere else and you keep trying. You have to work so hard. But I think the hardest work is to remain true to yourself when you're told no so many times.
Hi guys, just a quick video to show you how to cache functions. Here's a little problem with our convert function. Imagine that this convert function is getting called all over our application by many different parts of it, and it's converting a lot of different currencies all the time. Imagine we have some sort of application that does currency conversion for our users. You'll know by reading the documentation that this self.latest only changes once an hour. So if you make this request 1,000 times an hour, you're actually always going to get the same value back. Which means that making the request and actually interacting with the server, sending them data, getting them to send you data back, and all that is a bit of a waste, just because it's never going to change. Now, if you are on a paid plan, it does change more often, but because we're not, and we don't really need the granularity of changing every minute, we can stay on the free plan, and we can prevent our program from making this request over and over again as we use the convert function. So what we're going to do is we're going to first of all time the function. So we'll say input time, and then we're going to say that the start time is time.time, and the end time is time.time, and then we're going to print end minus start. What this is going to give us here in our code is how long it takes for this convert function to run. So if we press app and play, you'll see that it takes about half a second to run. So that's quite slow, and it's normal. It's normal that it takes that amount of time because it has to send data over the internet. It has to wait for the server to process it. It has to wait for the server to send data back over the internet, and then it has to do some work. However, if we do this over and over, for example, let's do it 3 times, say, and we will actually do this 3 times. So I've just copy and paste it 3 times, not the greatest thing to do, but just to show you that it always takes more or less the same amount of time. It always takes about half a second. So we're going to go over to our OpenExchange file, and we're going to cache this function so that the subsequent times we use it is instant. There is a built-in module in Python called functools that we may have seen before, and the functools module has a functools.lru cache, and we can define the max size, for example, to be 2. So the LRU cache means least recently used, and the max size is how many elements will stay in the cache. So maybe we should first of all explain what a cache is. A cache is just a piece of storage that keeps data temporarily. and the data that it keeps is data that is used or needs to be used so that when you want to use it again or you want to access that data again, it is very fast. So by caching this function, we're going to put the arguments of the function and the result into this temporary storage. Whenever we use the function again with the same arguments, it's going to get the data from the storage instead of running the function. So as long as the arguments don't change, the result will be instant. And that is why we've put a max size of 2, because this has no arguments, so it's never going to take up more than 1 slot in the cache. If you have arguments, then you may want to increase your max size so that you can account for different permutations of the arguments. Let's run app.py again, and you'll see how now the first instance takes 0.65 seconds, but subsequent instance take 5 essentially nanoseconds, I think that is. A very small amount of time, and you see that the program did finish much quicker. There is a small problem with this though, which is that if we have this application running and it runs for a very long time, because this only ever appears in the cache once, there are no arguments, it will never get removed from the cache, which means that our application will always be limited to using the first request that it ever made to the server. If our application runs for longer than an hour, that means that after an hour, this response will be outdated, because if we were to request it again, it would have changed in the server. What we want to do is we want to cache, but only up to an hour. And for that, we have to use a different package that we're going to look at in the next video. I'll see you there.
If you get to be 65 or 70 and later, and the people that you want to have love you actually do love you, you're a success. I've never seen anybody that reaches that age. I mean, I'm not talking about somebody that's in extreme poverty or pain or something, but I've never seen anybody that, if they have a lot of people that love them, that is other than happy. And I've seen some very, very wealthy people that they give testimonial dinners to and name schools after and everything. Nobody loves them, you know.
Hi guys, and welcome back. In this video, we're going to be doing TTL caching, or time to live caching, using another package called cachetools. Let's go over to our interpreter settings and install the cachetools package. So it's right here. Just go ahead and install that. And we're going to be using one of the things in this package, but it's actually got a few different caching functions that you can look at in the official documentation, linked in the resources section of this lecture. All you have to do is, instead of importing functools, we're going to say from cachetools, import cached TTL cache. Now, instead of functools LRU cache, we want to say at cached, and we're going to pass in a cache, which is TTL cache, and the max size, which is going to be 2, and the TTL, which is going to be 900. So that is a quarter of an hour. If you wanted to make this longer, you can do, but I'm just doing 900 so that it doesn't necessarily wait an entire hour for an update if there is one earlier. By doing this, you'll see that the app actually runs almost identically fast, but every 900 seconds, it will run slowly again because it will actually interact with the server again. This stuff here can be really useful, especially when you're interacting with APIs or when you're doing some sort of web scraping. For example, imagine you have a program that scrapes a website and gives the user some information back. If you have a lot of users all accessing the same program, you may be scraping the same site over and over again. Instead, what you could do is you could wrap the whole scraping in a cached from cachetools and only scrape it every 600 seconds, for example, every 10 minutes. That could make your program almost infinitely faster while not hurting your users at all. So hopefully you've learned something in this video.
We shared this stage 15 years, me and him. I don't know if it's ever happened in football. The same two guys in the same stage all the time. So it's not easy, as you know. And of course, we have a good relationship. We not had a dinner together yet, but I hope in the future I hope to be here next year and in 2 years, in 3 years. So the people who don't like me, they're gonna see me here.